Can all join pause? To repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. With palms down. All right. Good evening, everybody. Good to see you all. It's funny when I hit the little buttons here on the screen. It says the go live thing for all of our millions of YouTube followers. Good evening to you as well. And then it like pops up and it says, you are live. But for some reason this time when I saw it, I thought it said, and I see this every time for the last like year and a half, so it's not anything new. But I saw it and I thought it said, you are alive. And I was like, oh, thanks. thanks for the reminder. It was interesting because anyone's mind race with like laughter already. The hand didn't even go up. It was just the closing of the eyes. And you were laughing, right? It's hard to see under these masks, but you have to learn to just guess. So I guessed laughter. So the mind is racing. And so when I saw at least what appeared to say, you are alive, then my mind created a story from that. And all of a sudden I went back to when I was like 23 years old and I was on a flight back to San Diego. And I, for at that time, was going to try writing again. And I remember writing something and about like shocked that I was even still alive. And then Pearl Jam came on and I started hearing alive again. And so that all just triggered for me seeing the words, you're alive. And the funny thing is it didn't even say you're alive. It just said you are alive. So that's just some insight into, if you do this stuff for like 19 years, you too can have a mind that races all day long. It's really phenomenal. Someone said to me one time that they didn't like the fact that I said to them that this practice could, take them at least 7 years. And they were like really bummed out by that. And I learned a lot from that conversation because it was a lesson for me to remind myself and others that we are often people who come into these practices looking for like pretty quick solutions, pretty quick fixes. And so the stresses, the anxieties, the angers, the sadness, the depressions, the Buddha called this dukkha, those things that we're experiencing, we want those to go away. And we want them to go away quickly. Has anyone been able to get rid of all of those emotions? Right? It's just, they stay for a while. But when I said this to this young guy and I said, this will take you 7 years, he was really like, it was this almost as if he wanted to just quit and give up now. And so I've kind of altered my way of thinking about that because, if you're having a lot of trauma and difficulty in your life right now, and I tell you, give it 7 years, you'll be okay, that sounds like really daunting. It's not very motivating, right? I mean, how many of you came here thinking that, like, I hope I get this stuff figured out 7 years from now? Could you imagine your life exactly how it is with no changes for the next 7 years? Right? So I've altered this approach. And for me as a practitioner, I just started to look at it from really a day-to-day experience of what am I struggling with today? What are my challenges today? What are my difficulties today? And can I work on minimizing, reducing, decreasing these levels of stress and anxiety and anger and sadness and depression today? And for me as a practitioner, and also how I share it, it taught me to be a little more mindful of how I kind of throw, I'm a very sarcastic person. I joke a lot. I think laughter is important. But it reminded me to just be a little more careful of how I say those things and to whom and in what setting. So I never want people to think that this stuff is a quick fix, because it's definitely not. But I also don't want to discourage you from recognizing that if you bring this practice into your life each day, it will help each day. And if we can all get a little tiny bit of help mentally and emotionally each day, I think that can be very powerful for us as individuals. So anyways, with that, good evening, everybody. To everybody on YouTube, welcome. Good to see you all. I can see the screen now, so feel free. Say hello, introduce yourself to everybody else. If you have questions when we get there, happy to address them as well. But we'll start with the meditation practice. A couple things I'll tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You won't float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races won't shut off. Don't judge your practice. Don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Practice is learning to get quiet and still within all the chaos, and just learning to be with things as they arise. Posture, if you are on a cushion, often helps slide into the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed gently on the hands, hands gently on the knees or in the lap. If you need to move during meditation, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator, just means you need to move. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with your eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, we'll settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders. jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Lost in thought? Return to breath. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgment from the practice. Just sitting. Breathing. keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. The most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, there's nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit, hold the hands, or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awaken. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen and you react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way we responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how we respond to everything else throughout our day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way we feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, and focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Imagine going a day without being disturbed by someone. Imagine going an hour without being disturbed by someone. The night is young. We're lucky to make it home before we're disturbed. This practice is not an escape, as often people think it might be, especially if you're new. It's direct perception into this present moment. And very often these present moments that we experience are quite difficult. And so this practice is learning to be with things as they arise. And recognizing in each moment, what are our thoughts? What are our words? What are our actions? What is our intention behind each moment? And for me, this practice, and that's why when I kind of sat down and I saw "you're live," or to me it said "you are alive" words, those are things that they ring very deeply to me, because this whole practice really, I think, began to hit home when I started to actually have an appreciation for just being alive. And I think that in and of itself is something that we very often take for granted and overlook. We're often so wrapped up in the emotional stress and chaos and drama of everyday life that sometimes it's hard to take a few moments and just sit and breathe and just find a deep, deep sense of appreciation and gratitude for just being alive. Because that's not easy. Especially what we've seen the last 2 years. And so many of those who are no longer with us, many that we know and love, or many that we've seen from a distance, that just being alive is a pretty great feat right now. And so this practice of gratitude and appreciation is a good place to start. Because if we can find a deep sense of gratitude and appreciation for just being alive, then from there, that view, and that's in the Eightfold Path, the Buddha talks about the first one being the right view. So for those who are brand new, the 60-second overview is, he taught the Four Noble Truths. It was his first teaching. Life is filled with dukkha, suffering, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction, things that just don't seem right. That's dukkha. We experience that every day. Some of it is extreme, and some of it is, my coffee wasn't made the right way. Things that we'll probably survive through, even though at that moment it's, man, that's rough. Because all you want is that coffee, and then they just screwed it up. And you're like, oh, my whole day's over. I couldn't make my coffee. Or, you have your coffee, and all of a sudden you're ready to start your day, and then you drop it. So there's those things, which are pretty severe, actually, at times for certain people. And then there's real severe trauma and, suffering and loss. So the second noble truth is the cause of suffering, our greed, our anger, our ignorance. That's where we get wrapped up a lot. So we practice generosity, compassion, wisdom to overcome that. The third noble truth is the ending of suffering, and that's liberation, freedom from suffering, which is beautiful. And the fourth is the path, and that's the Eightfold Path. Having the correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. But those go in order. And it all starts with the right view. So if we struggle to have gratitude and appreciation for simply being alive, then everything we do after that view will follow. When we appreciate self and others and have gratitude for self and others, our thoughts and our words and our actions come from that place of gratitude. But when we lack gratitude and appreciation, and we carry that maybe anger or resentment or whatever those words are that we carry around in our hearts and our heads, then our actions come from those places. And those aren't always the best actions. I don't know that I've ever been angry and pissed off and gone off and done a lot of really nice, wonderful things for people. So, and I'll close with this thought. It helps, I think, for many people, especially, if you're struggling deeply with things, which, unless you just came for, the cool fans, most of us are struggling with stuff. And so when you are struggling with things, it really will help if you can find things in your life to just have gratitude for and appreciation for. It can change everything. No matter how bad things seem, the Buddhist teachings on impermanence reminds us that miserable moment that you're in, it will pass. So sometimes be grateful for the painful moments because they teach us a lot. They show us how strong we actually are and can be. We've survived whatever experiences we've gone through thus far. So don't be afraid to give yourself a little bit of credit and pat on the back for the journey you've had. It'll help you stay alive long enough to face another, day. So with that, I'll pause and really just prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. I'll use the rest of our brief time this evening. And again, for those who are joining us online here, welcome. If you have questions, feel free to add them here, and I'll do my best to respond.
All right, I don't know what the question is going to be by the end of this, but you said a couple of things that have just triggered my mind a bit.
Yeah.
First, really about instant gratification, and then the theme of patience obviously comes up. So, I found myself since coming here that in many ways I am a lot more patient, and I'm more patient with a lot more people in some ways, and in other ways now I'm less patient. And example for that would be two things that have come up through work within the past year. One is this wellness challenge that we're doing, and how you're challenged to meditate for a certain, every day for over a period of time. And it's always, a few months at a time. Another was an email I got about how Buddhism can make you more money. And both of those things now, like a couple years ago, probably would have just been on board with that.
Yeah.
Now it really bothers me seeing stuff like that. And I would just be curious, I guess, how you or others would,
Yeah.
I guess along with that also, other religions I've been a part of are growing up Catholic. I mean, I never once found a calling to like try to, teach that to other people or share that with other people.
Yeah.
It's never spoke to me, but now when I see stuff like that, I really want to just, I guess, teach them, but I'm also not qualified to do
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that makes two of us who aren't qualified to teach, so we're in the same boat here. There are no letters, certifications, or anything after my name, but I will give you some thoughts. Clearly, if Buddhism makes you more money, I've been attending the wrong classes and getting the wrong emails. A couple things come to mind. Such a great expression, and I'm struggling right now because the 3-hour discourse that I could give on what you just said, I'm trying to sum up into like 3 minutes. Early on in Buddhist practice, there's an expression I came up with years ago. I call it Buddhist arrogance. And it's something that I went through. And this is a little bit different, yet also I think applies to what you're saying. So I'm going to start here. And that is that, one, I think it's beautiful because you've been around this place how long now?
A few years.
Yeah. And
consistently this year.
And in that time frame, you've seen changes in your life, which is beautiful. So, keep at it. That's the important part, which you are, obviously. The experience I had early on with Buddhist stuff, and this is what triggered it, was what you said, was often this practice can make things easier, and often this practice can make things more difficult. Meaning, there are lots of things that wouldn't have bothered you before, like you just said, right? But now all of a sudden, this Buddhist thing is important to you. That's what I heard in what you just shared.
Absolutely.
And if somebody shoots at that, you're hurt. That little heart with the smiley face on your shirt is like really mad right now. Because you're like, how dare you attack what I love? Where a few years ago, you wouldn't have cared. So when I first started this practice, I remember going through this, what I call Buddhist arrogance stage, where all of a sudden, I was now critiquing and judging people. I'm not saying you're doing this, for doing the exact same things I was doing like 6 weeks earlier.
Yep.
So here I am, like 6 weeks into this Buddhist stuff, and now my best buddies who are going to the places and doing the things I was doing 6 weeks earlier, now all of a sudden I think I'm better than they are. Right? That's why there's a whole teaching on spiritual bypassing, and not enough time to go into all that, but we have to try to remember that you'll like movies that somebody else won't like. You'll like food that somebody else won't like. If they don't like the movie or food that you don't like, it probably doesn't bother you all that much. But all of a sudden, something that is so deeply in your heart right now, they have attacked that. You would have been okay with that in the past. So part of it goes into our attachment, and I'm just rambling just like with you. Your question was a rambling of thoughts that were on your mind. So my response is a rambling of thoughts to your rambling of thoughts, which is we can get very attached to our Buddhism. And I see this so often, right? where all of a sudden we have found the keys to the kingdom. And nobody's going to take that from us. Quick look around the room. To my knowledge, I don't think anybody here was raised Buddhist. Most people, is there anyone here that was raised Buddhist? I could be wrong. Most people in this culture come into Buddhism later on in life. I was raised Jewish, you were raised Catholic, you got Christianity, Catholicism, Judaism, Muslim, paganism, you got a lack there, all the above. We find Buddhism later in life and we hold on tight to it. And we're like, man, this is my thing. Don't mess with it. Try to drop that guard a little is the first part. Does that make sense so far? And so that's just a general theme. The second part around, the Buddhism making money, this is a long thing for me to get into because it's been a huge, important focus of mine for 15 years. There's a great article. Google, or I'll write it down for you, but Ajahn Jeff, or Thanissaro Bhikkhu, wrote an article. He runs Metaphorist. He's the abbot up there. He wrote an article called No Strings Attached. It is one of the best pieces I've ever read around the money tied to Buddhism. And he talked about how when he came to teach, it comes from his master, talking about how when he came to teach in this country, how turned off he was by what this culture has done with money and Buddhism. And they've taken, so the very first teaching, the root cause of our suffering is greed. We overcome greed with generosity. So the very first practice as you begin to cultivate is to give. Now, in our culture, in a religious, spiritual setting, if someone says give, what immediately comes to most people's mind? Money. Anytime I give a talk on dana, which translates to generosity, the word dana, right? It's all about giving people time, give them attention, give them a heart, give them a smile, give them a hug. It has nothing to do with money. The Buddha himself taught that the greatest gift one can give is the Dharma. It is the practice and teachings of Buddhism. That's the greatest gift. And I don't mean like sitting up here giving a Dharma talk. I mean giving kindness, giving compassion, giving understanding, giving love, giving these teachings to people is the greatest gift, right? But in the West, it's like, in the article, he talks about how Western folks view Buddhist teachings as if you've ordered food and you're at a restaurant. And when you're done eating, then you're going to leave a tip. But you're judging. Was the food good? Was the service good? How were my needs met? And then you're going to determine, am I going to give them 20%, 17%, 10%, 11%, right? The Dharma, that ain't it. Now, early on in my Buddhist days, I used to have heavy, heavy judgment towards people who did charge for Buddhism, right? Teachings. I have softened through it's called a group of about 50 to 60 Dharma teachers in US, Europe, Canada. It's called the Gen X Dharma Teacher Group, Sangha. And I met some wonderful, wonderful people. Actually, everybody I've met through this group has been wonderful. And their whole life is devoted to, as lay people, most of them, some monks and nuns, but mainly lay people, their whole life is devoted to sharing the Dharma, right? Now, the fact that they maybe get paid for it, or the fact that they charge people for it, doesn't mean what they're sharing is bad or wrong, right? I used to have no space in my mind or heart for that understanding. I was like instantly judging. My arrogance came in, my Buddhist arrogance. It was like, no, right? Now, ultimately, when you look at the life of the Buddha would have died if it were not for the wealthy people. People need to understand this. Before we lay heavy judgments on these types of things, right? I can see both sides now, which I couldn't see before. If you read the life of the Buddha, what he actually did when he first started teaching, what was his life? He was a what? When he left being a prince, he became what?
An ascetic.
An ascetic. He was a homeless, wandering beggar. He was an ascetic. That's how they lived in India. If you are not given food, what's going to happen? You're going to die. If you're not given water, what's going to happen? You're going to die. If you're not given land, Anathapindika was the wealthy business person that said, here is the land, go teach. All of that is in Buddhism as well, right? If he went to where nobody was going to support him and his community, they would have died, right? That's just the truth. That's the reality of the situation, right? Now, modern day, is that absolutely taken advantage of by many people? I believe so. What they do is they give what's called, and I'll kind of close this, like I said, this is the one thing that I could go on and on forever about. Actually, that's a lie. I could go on and on about a lot of things. But what Western culture has done is we have taken this word dana, which is generosity, and Western Buddhists have translated dana to equal money. And what they do is at the end of something like this, right? So you come together, you feel good, there's 300 people in the room, you've opened up their hearts, you've shared beautiful wisdom, and then they say at the end, and this Buddhism in the West is covered with this, and it makes me sick, quite honestly. Like, it really makes me sick. Hang on. I didn't hear what you said. Oh, yeah, don't go there. Hang on. I did hear what you said. At first, I didn't think I heard it, and then I heard it, and I was like, still don't go there. Don't go there. We're not attacking. All right? And so then what America does with the word dana is they give what's called a dana talk. And now that you're all here, thank you all for being here. Hope you all feel wonderful. Hope your heart's open. Hope you feel great. And now I'm going to teach you about dana. Dana is generosity. I'm pretending here. Okay, this is my pretending voice. And the greatest thing you can do is give. So now I want you all to give because I just spent this time to be here with you all. And I need to live. Nonsense. Don't use Buddhism as a tool to make your money. There's no room for that. But that's what America does. I hate to put it so bluntly. And there's a fine line between how that's done. In many cases, I've seen it done very beautifully, and I've seen it done very poorly. But when we change the meaning of the word dana, which is generosity, people even in this culture call it a dana bowl. They then pass the basket around and call it a dana bowl. They use dana in replace of the word money, but they put a Buddhist spin on it. So then it's guilt, pressure. Go ahead, and then I'll finish my thought.
I was just going to say, right before the quarantine, I've got to go to a longer retreat. And the dana talk that came at the end almost doubled the price of the retreat.
Of course it does, because what you've done. Sorry, go ahead.
And they just don't tell you that up front.
No.
You can plan for it, and it was a really weird, uncomfortable feeling.
Miserable. And what you do is people pay for these retreats, and then at the end, they say, now your retreat paid for everything here, but now's an opportunity for you to give dana for the teacher. What did I say earlier? The greatest gift?
The teachings.
Is the teachings. Right? Now, one thing I want to add, what the Buddha actually taught the monks and nuns was when you teach about dana, about generosity, you do not teach it until after somebody had already given. Therefore, you cannot use it as a way to manipulate and pressure and guilt people into giving. He was very clear to the monks about that. You do not teach generosity until people had already given. And then you teach them about the merit of giving, but not as a tool to get them to give. And that very specific, like, reversal of an order there, that's what goes on, that you see at all these places. And it's sad. So those are my thoughts. Those are my brief thoughts. Good question. Yeah. John, sorry, you were going to say something earlier. And yeah.
You kind of start touching on it. It was just with the money. I mean, Donna, to me, and pretty much learning from you for the last 10 years, has been recognizing what is needed and being willing to give that, whether it be a hug or a hello or help a friend move or money.
Yeah. Yes. And let me clarify, since you said that, I'm not saying that money isn't a part of giving, but it's not the only part. And that's what Buddhism tends to overlook, you know? And the last, the best teaching, I would say, about generosity from the Buddha is, he said there were 3 factors for it to be considered true dana, true generosity. And he said, when you give, whatever it is that you give, the 3 conditions, 3 factors for it to be dana is, do you feel pleasant before, pleasant during, and pleasant after? If all 3 of those conditions are not there, it's not dana. It's not generosity. It doesn't mean you haven't given somebody something, you know. But like Jennifer, in those circumstances you just said, there's not much pleasant feeling there. There's a feeling of being, for me, taken advantage of, twisted, manipulated, right?
Well, and if you don't know, if you're somewhat new to the retreat setting, it just wasn't something that I had planned for. And I wasn't completely 100% opposed, but I just hadn't planned for it, and it was a big surprise.
Yes, it's very sneaky. And that's where I think an example, there was a Sri Lankan monk years ago taught at the old Buddha for You location, and he gave a great example of true generosity, true dana, for all 3 conditions that were met. And he said, imagine you have a child, it's your child or, you know, someone else's child that you know and love, and you want to buy them a bike. They're like 5 years old, you want to buy them a bike for their birthday. And so you're all excited, you're getting ready to buy this bike, you're looking for it, you're shopping for it, right? And then you show up and you buy the bike. You're pleasant, like feeling good buying this bike. And then you give the child the bike. And the child rides away on the bike. And you just feel pleasant watching the child ride away on the bike. You feel pleasant before, you feel pleasant during, you feel pleasant after. I mean, these are, I hate to call them, but these are very textbook definitions and teachings of the Buddha on what dana actually is and what generosity actually is. So clear. And that's why that article, No Strings Attached, I used to argue this thing forever. And then years ago, I came across this article and I was like, here, stop listening to me, go argue with Tom Jeff. You know, nobody does, but. So, yeah. All right. Well, that pretty much took us to 8 o'clock. So, yeah. Yeah.
That was a super quick question.
Yeah.
Not related to anything you were just saying.
That's all right.
Maybe somebody else will want to know too, because I don't want to know. Who are these ladies that are?
So these are, and I'll sum this up in brief. They're called Bodhisattvas in Buddhism. Bodhisattva translates to enlightened being. Bodhi is enlightened, sattva is being, right? They're often looked at, think of them as like angels, emanation bodies of the Buddha, right? Google Bodhisattvas, you can read up all about them. This one is Samantabhadra. He was the Bodhisattva of great practice, great diligence, great effort. He's on the elephant that has 6 tusks. These six tusks represent what's called the paramitas in Buddhism. The practice of the Bodhisattva is to bring these 6 practices into your life to liberate all sentient beings from suffering. So the Bodhisattva vow is to be reborn life after life until all beings are free from suffering. In other words, like, it's not about you anymore. Because you're just like going through your day thinking, oh, I just want to figure this all out before I die. No, the Bodhisattva vow is, I want to figure this all out and then be reborn so I can keep learning it and teaching it. That's the Bodhisattva vow, to be reborn life after life until all beings are free from suffering. It's a serious no joke. And it takes away you. No ego, no you, just this formless consciousness, right? That's the Bodhisattva vow. So these three are, the larger ones are all Bodhisattvas. The 6 tusks on the paramitas are generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, wisdom. That's what that represents, right? This one here, Manjushri, represents great wisdom, right? These are both most often depicted in the male form, right? This is Manjushri, represents wisdom. Sits on a cute little lion because it is symbolic of our minds, which are often like, you ever been in a cage with a crazy lion? No.
Can't say that.
I don't suggest you try this at home, but imagine being in a cage with a crazy untamed lion. It would be a mess, right? It would not be pretty. That's our mind. It's like being in a cage with a crazy lion. And what's he done to the lion? Tamed him, right? And the lion even looks happy, peaceful, and cute, okay? So that represents great wisdom. That's the Buddhist teachings on that type of wisdom that can tame your mind, right? And this one in the middle behind me is, her name is Kuan Yin, Avalokiteshvara, the great Bodhisattva of compassion. The Dalai Lama, they say, is the literal rebirth of Kuan Yin. That's why he has so much compassion, right? And her name means hearer of the world's cries. So she hears all the suffering in the world, and then the vase is the vase of compassion. Pours out compassion to heal. So I gave a whole talk on this when we first put them in here. It's on, you can pull it up on the website and see it. But when we have the statues blessed and all this stuff. But the beautiful thing about the Kuan Yin is that when we looked at what statue we wanted here, most places would have the Buddha, right? We have our little starving, emaciated Buddha there, but we felt that what this temple needed, what this community needed, what this world needed was the female embodiment and the female power of compassion. So we went with the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin as our main center shrine piece.
Bodhisattva
Kuan Yin.
Kuan Yin.
You could Google Kuan or Guan and then Yin. Yeah. Yep.
Okay,
So,
thank you. Appreciate that.
you're welcome. All right, so with that, we'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace and free from suffering. May the merit gained be transferred to nearly 6 million lives that have been lost during this pandemic, their family and friends who suffer at this time, and to all of those in Ukraine and surrounding areas that suffer at this time. May they all have peace and be free from suffering. May we all have peace and be free from suffering. All right, a few quick announcements before you head out and spend the rest of your evening being kind and generous and compassionate to everybody you encounter. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened this temple 15 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students, we're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhism and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who do show up. So every night, different practices going on, different people leading from a different Buddhist tradition. Closed for 18 months out of the last 24. It's great to be open again. We've slowly worked back in our normal schedule. The family sangha, the family group, will start up again on Saturday, May 14th at 9 a.m. It used to be twice a month. It'll start back at once a month. So if you're a parent, if you're a kid, show up. It'll be on the website, that'll all go up there. And then also the Day of Silence retreats, that will also start again in June. So we're just grateful to be slowly working back to our normal schedule. We appreciate you being here. And I mean, seriously, for me, I am grateful to be alive. I'm grateful to be here and sit with all of you. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to share this practice. And you picked the one thing that, like, I'm so passionate about that times a million, because I feel that the greatest thing the Buddha taught to overcome suffering is to give. And here we are in a country where Buddhism is so new, and we've already ruined the way we teach the greatest teaching. So it is my personal life's mission to figure out how to make a dent in that. So, yeah, we'll figure it out. Thanks all.